So we're gonna go ahead and get started. Ms. Garza, if you can pull up your EdSite data really quick, and then I'll pull up yours here. We're gonna review the observation that we had today in class. It was a quick 15-20 minute observation that we had during your last class of the day. So thank you for letting me be there. I appreciate it. And let me pull up your data really quick. And we'll talk about what I noticed.
Do you need to see the item analysis report or the dynamic report?
Yeah, and the teaks as well.
Okay, so
Here we can show the teaks. Your profile sheet here. Okay, so we have the grades from end of module 1 and end of module 2.
I have end of module 3. We just took it.
Okay. So we'll get started with what was the lesson about today. So I wanted to, before I put my good notes on it, and before we talk about it, today you were talking about area, which is something that you had said that you had done before.
Yes.
So you started yesterday with the fluency on data. So I was able to see a little snippet of it. What do you think was going really well of your lesson?
I think that the grid paper helps a lot since we had introduced it a while back. It would have been really helpful for them to see, like, when we would draw arrays, we would even just, before we even mentioned like area, they would follow the squares. And so that was like something that was introduced a long time ago, that they see a multiplication sentence and now they're like, okay, 3 by whatever, and they're able to turn that into a array.
Yeah, I noticed that like the grid paper was really helpful for them.
Yes.
So it just went on with the array. I noticed that too. They were very adamant about using the squares and counting the squares, so I could tell that that came from like a process that you had already established, because they were already used to it. I don't think there was a single student that I saw in there that wasn't using the grid paper the way it should be, like following the line. So that must have taken a lot of prep work
for sure.
do, which is good because I noticed it. And then going into what lately have you been struggling specifically with that lesson?
From introducing it earlier this week, I think it was probably the I guess the formula itself, the area equals length times width. They see the L and they want to say like long. I mean, it's the same thing, right? But they're just saying L. They're not, like, I guess, matching it with, okay, length is how long it is and width is how, tall it is, I guess, on the paper.
So which is good because they use the formulas in 4th grade. And I'm glad that you're sticking with it, and they know that the L is not just an L, it means length and it means width.
For sure.
So I'm glad that they're using that. When I was walking around, aside from using the grid and the formula, I noticed that when you were calling out for answers, they did such a good job at answering, like, because I could tell that you already established like a fundamental rule of when I ask you something, it's not just yes or no. So they did a really good job of I'm multiplying, or I'm getting this area because of this and that. So that was really fun to see. So I can tell that you already trained them and taught them how to do to answer with critical thinking, which is good. So then my next question is, do you have any students that are struggling with that?
I do. I have a few that when I'm asking them something, they're like, oh, it's because it says 3. Okay, but how did we find 3? Getting them to explain it's just like, it's 3. Yes, it's 3. And that's pretty much what they're doing. They're just stopping there. They're not explaining it.
And so they're still doing that?
A few of them, I have maybe like in that class, I have maybe 1 or 2 that I guess it's like they get lost in thought and they want to explain so much that they're just like, it's right there,
Yeah. But I mean, it's good because, like I said, most of them are already on. And you're always going to have students that it's going to take them a good while for them to understand what's going on. And you're always going to have that. But as long as you keep pushing them, which is what I admired. Like, I admired that during your teaching, and you picked a lot of students who, I don't know how your classroom arrangement is, but you were picking a lot of students who I saw were struggling before. And I believe that you already knew that they were struggling before. So you did ask the question. They didn't have an answer. But so my next step for that would be, like, if they don't answer, go on to a higher student that you know, have them answer it, and go back to that student to see if they can answer it for you.
Okay.
Because the more they get involved, the less you lose them. The less they if they know that their expectations, even though that they're not as high as everybody else, that they're still there.
Okay.
So I agree with you on that, but I was very, very impressed with how the students were responding, especially when they were talking about the two different models. So let's jump into that. So while I was walking around, you were doing a fluency on finding the area. They used the grid paper, and you were instructing them to make an area model using specific lengths. So in the beginning, at first it was make an area model with this specific area.
Mm-hmm.
And then you gave them their instructions. You did a really good job of walking around, naming your laps, which I saw. Then when you were walking around, I also was walking around and I was looking at everybody. And I immediately noticed the two types of models. So there is a model with a side of 8 and a side of 1, which again gives you an area of 8. And then I saw another model with 4 and 2, which was really good to see because they're seeing it a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And I had other students explain to me that it was 4, or explain to you that it was because they had a 4 on the side and then 2 on the side.
Mm-hmm.
So I was gonna ask, why do they have those two specific models? Like, why not have this model
The two
only?
So I think when I explained it, I shouted out one student who did have the 1 by 8.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that one was the easiest one for them to already see, like, okay, there's gonna be 8 in this square if I just do 8 by 1 because it's 8 times 1
Mm-hmm.
equals 8. Except that's why I kept saying, challenge yourself, stop doing the ones, try another one.
Mm.
That's why I wanted to push their thinking, but because that was the first time that they had seen that. Usually, like yesterday, it wasn't even about finding. I mean, it was about finding the area, but the module had not started with just the area,
Mm-hmm.
and so the fluency was like the introduction to today's lesson. And so that's why I was like, okay, I see why we're getting the 1,
Mm-hmm.
but let's try this. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, it is because it's easier to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8
Oh, yeah.
all the way up, especially because they're used to skip counting, which I noticed that you mentioned skip counting, and that's a good connection to area and multiplication. And I really liked their explanation on that because it is skip counting. When you have rows and you have columns, when they're going to get into that in 4th and 5th grade. So that was good. The only reason that I'm pointing this specific thing out is because when you're making your laps and you have your exemplar in hand, you are making your laps and you need to know what you're looking for. The variation of having both of these is understandable, 8 by 1, but at that point you need to see how, one, if they're understanding what it is both ways. So you're already splitting one concept into 2,
Okay.
and it's harder for you to keep track of, well, do they understand that this is the same as this if they're only drawing one model?
Okay.
Okay, and 2, how is it tested? How are they going to see it? Because as much as they understand the 8 by 1, if they don't see it in the STAR test and they don't understand this model, you're losing.
Yeah,
You're losing them.
Yeah.
So, which is why I wanted to ask, do you know how to log into Leap Forward?
I do.
Okay, so I went and I looked at the TEAC that you were working on, which was, help me out.
It was 3.2G, I believe.
3.6C, which is what I got from the lesson plan.
Yes.
So 3.6C, determine the area of rectangles with the whole number of side lengths in problems using multiplication related to the number of rows times the number of unit squared. So I went on Leap Forward and I went to see how this specific TEAC was taught. And you see right here, like for example, for 1, they have the area model with the length and the width, but they don't have that long.
Yeah.
So looking into your TEACs, how it's being tested, and essentially making sure that you're very purposeful in your teaching is going to help you.
Okay.
So I printed this out and you can see some more examples, and it's the same thing. And I know you're a first year teacher, so when I was a first year teacher, last year in STAR, because STAR is a whole different ballgame, I wanted to focus a lot on the details, which is good. There's nothing wrong with focusing on the details of them understanding both models. I think last year I was over explaining something and Mr. Rodriguez had to stop me and say, okay, wait. As much as you want to explain this and make sure that they are elaborating in this sense, how are they going to get tested on there? Are they going to see it again that way? How are you contributing to that? So that was something that I had to figure out. And I noticed you going the same route, which is you want them to know both ways, which is still really important. It's beneficial into their everyday lives regardless. But the TEKS are also very important. So regardless of what you're teaching, even if it's small like a fluency, how is it getting tested to make sure that you're using your time appropriately and wisely? And not only that, skipping back into your laps, when you're doing your laps, it's easier to check work to make sure that everyone has it. So at first I was thinking, oh, well then maybe she can ask for them to do both. You know, right now everyone's doing the first model, then everyone's doing the second model, just to transition. Of course, I don't know how much more of this fluency you're going to have in your lesson, because I saw you just started it, which means you're going to have it a lot recently, and it's eventually going to morph to only using this model. So if you want tomorrow, you can say, okay, everybody is going to do this model where it's 8x1, and I want to check, make sure that everyone has their thing, and then skip on to this one, because you never know, maybe you're going to have a lot more misconceptions on this one that you wouldn't have caught.
Just a question, because I know like the lesson mentions, right, like in that fluency it says that we're just giving them the area. For example, that one was find the area of a square that's 8. How would you set it up into a question where it's like find the area of a square that, well, find the length of width of a square that has an area of 10, right? Because then they're thinking there's lots of different ways to make 10, 5x2, 10 by 1, I don't know, you know, I'm just giving an example.
Okay, so let's use 10. That's a good example. So let's use 10. If I'm a student, that's why when you're writing your exemplar, how would you have them? What are the different ways that you can do it? So 2x10, 2x5 is one, where it would be 2 and then 5. 5x2 would be another one, and that would be it. That would be your different options. So if you want to make sure that for sure what you're checking is exactly what they're doing, talk about the variations. Talk about, do a quick think aloud saying, okay, if I'm trying to find an area, a model of 10, there's different ways. Raise up your hand and if you can tell me one way. That way you can even take it a step further in making sure that everybody is on the same page, even the ones who don't understand it. Then when you release them, of course, this is all for our we do. Okay. Once you release them, as long as your exemplar has those 2 versions, you're okay. But what I was noticing is that while you were doing your we do together, there was too much of a variation for you to pinpoint, okay, this requires a reteach, this doesn't require a reteach. Because when you released them, when you moved on from doing it together and you said, okay, now these are your lengths or whatever, I noticed there was, I think it was the ratio, I checked like 10 kids, maybe 6 or 7 were correct. Which makes sense because you always have those students. But could you have targeted those 3 or 4 students in this section? Could you have figured out this is their issue? I'm going to reteach it really quick to make sure that when they're by themselves, they're okay with it. So this is very detrimental only during the part of we do, when you're doing it together, just to make sure that everybody's on the same page, making sure that everybody's doing what they're supposed to, so that when they're released, they can do either or, but you know that they're not going to have an issue counting the boxes, they're not going to have an issue with all that stuff. So that was my main thing about that. So for the next test, how is it being, what is this going to jump into? I wasn't able to look at the lesson plan like that far ahead.
Well, today's lesson was pretty much the foundational of it. In their quiz, because they have a quiz coming up after break, and it's just like that, and that's the only quiz in this module. I don't know where it is. Yeah, so for 3.60, it's tested exactly like the way you pointed out. So finding the important info, that's what I have, and then writing the length times width. So you're right. If they don't see it, they're not going to be able to do it. And it's tested like that, well, multiple times. The same thing with just the length and width.
So is it that they're given the width and the length, or
no,
they're the area? Both?
Yeah, they're given the squares to find it with the size.
Oh, with the ruler.
But they're needing to find it themselves.
Okay. So then let's stick to a model that they're going to use,
Okay.
even if it's a foundational lesson, because you're eventually going to jump into that.
Okay.
Which again, there's nothing wrong with making sure that they know that it's the same.
Okay.
That's what I would say. Now, aside from the model, the pacing of the lesson was good. It was really good. I really liked getting the exemplar and showing it to them, because I think that pushed them and that motivated them and they wanted to get picked, so I enjoyed that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I don't know if it was on purpose, but there's one that you picked that was like going the right way. It was supposed to be 10, but there was like 11
more,
yeah. Did you do that on purpose?
No, I thought when I looked, because they had the labels correct, it said 10, but when I went back to count one by one, I was like, oh, this is 11. So they had all their labels. They labeled that side 10, that side 1, and then they did their math, but then it was not 10.
But I enjoyed that, because there was a little kid who was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
He was in the corner. So he's kind of picking up on everybody. So I enjoyed that, and I think you should keep doing that. I think you should keep showing exemplars. I didn't know you had an overhead thing.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me want an overhead thing so that I can show them. Excuse me. But I really enjoyed that. So definitely keep doing that, using it like their own exemplars to show the work, because I think it can only go so far when it's the teacher showing it the exact way to do it.
Yeah.
To get to see how your classmates are doing that. So I really, really enjoyed that.
Mm-hmm.
So that was great. Your laps were really great. About the laps, you stopped naming them exactly how they were during the you do, which is understandable, because that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to let them out on their own to do. But at that point in time, when you're making your laps, there were a lot of students who were not doing, I think it was the area formula.
Okay.
A lot of them were really good at writing the area formula, which I was really impressed by, especially in the beginning lesson of 3rd grade, because it's really hard to stick to that, and they see perimeter and area in 4th grade. But when you were doing the laps, I noticed that a lot of students didn't have that. So what should have been the next steps seeing that?
So I guess it would have been, okay, the first thing I want to see written down is our formula.
Exactly.
And then checking it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now we can move on. Now you're going to plug in the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because there are going to be questions like in this one where it's a story. They don't have a picture, because this would be a very, not easy, because I don't want to say it's easy. It's still a hard concept for any 3rd grader, right, to get the area of a model. But having the model there is going to be a lot easier than having it in a story form. And the story form, once you teach them, hey, this is looking for area, they're going to have to go remember the area formula, write it down, because it's very easy to get confused.
Yeah.
And then draw their own model from that. So making sure that everyone's using the area model. So at that point, yes, stop, redo your instructions, and do it play by play. Mm-hmm. And the thing about that is it's very hard to do the criteria for success over and over and stop after every incidental thing. So don't do it. Don't do it after everything. Just do it when you're seeing the kids doing something wrong. You have 70-80% doing it right, but those 20% that can just get tweaked just by step, just go back and do that. Okay. Because that could really help. It was that, and they were doing, again, a really good job with the area models for being an introductory lesson. They were doing it correctly. But then I also saw some inconsistencies of the length and the width.
Yeah.
And again, going back to your laps, what would be easier, if everyone did the same thing or everyone didn't? So maybe already teaching them that the length is on top or the bottom, mm-hmm. The width is on the side. I want an area model with a length of 6 and a width of 8. If you catch that misconception, again, kind of going into like, okay, this is what a length is, this is what a width is, this is how you put it into the formula. Okay. Because in 4th grade and 5th grade, they struggle a lot with that. We're putting the numbers into the formula and using that formula rather than just having it there and not really understanding why they're multiplying. They're multiplying because the formula is area equals length times width, okay. Which is what you're doing. So when you're doing the you do, if you need to reteach and do it step by step, having them park their pencil, doing this and doing that. Again, it could be very like tiresome for the students who already know it. Yeah. But once you get into student accountability for every student, they're going to try a little bit better. You're not going to get everyone all the time. Yeah. Don't reteach for the 1 student, 2 students, pull them aside later on and do that. So that's what I can tell you about that. So how do you feel about that as your next step?
I agree. I
Yep.
think being a little bit more clear would work.
I think it will work a lot. So then we're gonna stop here for now, but we're gonna continue tomorrow, and we'll continue with the post conference after you do some of the fix-ups.
Okay.
So we'll talk about how you felt implementing the feedback. So again, your feedback is going to be fixing up on the criteria for success a little bit, and then making sure that your exemplar is the same exemplar that everybody follows. That way it's easier to check, and making sure that you're stopping the lesson to reteach those small little misconceptions and making sure they do the steps. Okay. So we'll meet again tomorrow during the post conference.
Okay. Sounds good.
And all right. Hello, Miss Garza. How are you?
Good, good.
Okay, I'm glad we can continue our conversation. I'm sorry I had to be on Zoom, but certain circumstances. So I'm glad to see you. We're here to have our post meeting on our observation from a few days ago. So just to kind of wrap up what we were talking about, we were talking about the observation that I had a few days ago. We touched up on a few things that I've noticed. So a few things that we were talking about was the student engagement that you had. You had a really positive student engagement. You had a lot of students who, and I'm sorry, I'm talking over here, but I have my screen over here. We had a lot of students in your classroom that were really engaged. They were answering in with critical thinking skills. You can tell that you have taught in a way that the students are comfortable asking questions, and had rigor behind those questions, and they were very on top of asking you why things were the way they are in the classroom. So that was very, very nice to see. We also spoke about your next action steps. So our next action steps there were 2 things that we're going to work on. And prior to the observation, we did not rate you because I wanted to wait until our post observation after we had a conversation to see how you would be rated in the second time that you were observed. So, and we're going to hit up on that in a little bit because I already conducted your post observation. So great job on that. So we were talking about how a few things when you were monitoring the students' progress is that there's 2 different models at that time for that specific lesson. The students were working on area models, and there's 2 types of area models that were being written. Both were correct, which they should be. They were both correct. One was with a model of nine all in one row, and then there was a 3x3 model, which is also an area of 9. So last time we were talking about making sure that when you're making your observations, you're making your laps, you provide an exemplar, an example, so that it aligns with how the students are going to be tested on it on the STAR test. So on the STAR test, they're more used to seeing those 3x3 models. So we spoke about having an exemplar done beforehand, or having all students make sure that they're doing the same area model, so that when you're walking around, it'll be easier for you to make sure that everybody's on the same page. It'll be easier for you to make sure that they're all understanding what's going on. And also you're aligning it to how they're going to see it. So that was one action step. Actually, those are both action steps combined into one. It was making sure that we do that in connection with the STAR test. How did you feel? What did you do afterwards? How did you feel after that initial conversation?
So I did go back. You had given me the aligned resources from the start, from the lead forward. I did see. I wanted to check out those questions to see if the Eureka problems were aligned, like kind of similar to that. The next lesson did have. They were not using the 1x8 or the 1x9 model. They were all using the ones that we talked about. So on the second one, it was much easier for me to see, like, okay, this is what was on STAR. This is how we're going to do it, and it was aligned to our do now and to the problem set. So they were able to see the model that we had wanted initially the one that we wanted to see. So seeing that helped, being a little bit more clear on on what problem I guess we wanted to look at was better.
Yeah, they definitely they looked more in sync the second time I went around. So the second time I went around, you had a similar lesson that was having to do with area, and I noticed that you took the next steps because prior to me being there, I guess you must have talked to them or reviewed it, and they were already. I think out of the 20 students so and so that I walked around, about 18 or 19 of them were using the 3x3 model, the 5x5 model, which was really good to see because I know that not only did you take in what we talked about the last observation, but you made the adjustments beforehand and you were already practicing it the new way, and they were very quick to listen to you and very quick to use that new methods, which was really good. Did you have any problems introducing it again over again? Did you have still some students that were doing it the old way? How did you
Yeah,
make sure they were all on the same page?
I did. I still had a few of them that wanted to do the 1x8, the 1x9, the 1x6 models. But I had them all stop. I wanted them to challenge themselves, and that's what I said. Challenge yourselves. Let's not do that one. Now let's work on something that has three, a side of three, right? Or a side of four. And that helped them push them thinking of like, okay, this is the area that I want. This is one side that I can do. I'm looking for the other side. What's missing? And so that pushed them a little bit outside of the box, thinking more critically.
And did you still have those students that were telling you, it's still the same, it's still the right answer?
No, I thankfully they all switched to the bigger models. They stopped doing the one by model, the one by
Okay,
something models, and they all switched into the bigger models. So very
awesome.
interesting to see.
And I was gonna ask so I was looking into the lesson plan, and it doesn't really have a lot of manipulatives to use the models. I guess they, at this point in time in the lesson, they're already supposed to be a little bit more further ahead in their comprehension skills to understand that in 3x3. Those two students that I saw that were struggling with the model, again, it wasn't that they were sticking back to the 9x1 model. They were sticking back with the 3x3. Have you done any, I was just going to ask you, I was noticing any intervention for those students with manipulatives that you think could be beneficial towards them?
Yeah, the cool thing about this lesson that you saw, the second one, a lot of the lesson did require inside, not the problem set, but the concept did require them to use like post-its, the 1 inch tiles and the centimeter tiles.
Okay.
So just them getting their hands on with that did really clear up a little of the confusion from making from big strips to making them into like bigger models. That helped them a lot.
That's good.
A lot more asking questions.
I'm glad that you already have something in place for intervention students with that. The closer that you get to STAR and the benchmarks, the more tight I would like your groups to be, so that you can provide more hands-on intervention for those students. Because it sounds like it's not a computational error so much as they need to be able to use those manipulatives, which could be really helpful for them. But I know that when you're already walking around and making your laps and checking for certain things, it could feel a little bit rushed to them, and you do need to take the time to individually make sure that everyone's doing what they're supposed to be doing, and then we can do that later on with tutoring or some one-on-one that we can fit into your lesson plan. Because as it is right now, our schedule is so tight. You have your schedule already posted. You already know what you're supposed to do, and as it is, I know you had mentioned before that it's already so tight, your schedule with the concept development and problem set. The further, now that you're a little bit further into your module currently in the year, I was going to ask, how do you feel about your schedule right now? Do you feel that you can push it more so that you have that extra time towards the end for your intervention students, or how does the schedule feel right now?
It does feel still a little bit too tight. But I think that is just I want to say a me thing. I do take occasion a little bit too long on the fluency part of Eureka. I think one thing that I really need to hold myself more accountable is the timing of it. I know that it's very time, like 8 minutes to do this, 4 minutes to do that. And I tend to not. I like over explain things. So I think a timer would help keeping me on track, because I know like the debrief part of it is only 8 minutes, and then I still have like 20 minutes until the class period's over. So if I can just allow myself that time during the fluency, during the do now, during those things to follow the time, I should have that time at the end to work on those intervention steps.
That's good. So not quite there yet, but you
Working
feel
on
like
it.
you'll get there a little bit more. And like I
Yeah.
said, we're getting closer to our benchmarks. We're having our benchmarks in December. So that's going to give us more of an overview with our data. We're going to assess our data, we're going to organize it, and we're going to pinpoint what specific changes we can make to make sure that those students are targeted, whether it's during class, in school, or afterwards, because we do have that chunk during our conference time that we're going to start using. We have an hour and a half of conference time, so 45 minutes, maybe once or twice a week will help with that, with pulling in those kids during their electives, and making sure that they're doing what they need to be doing. So let's go over your rating. So now that we're completed with our second observation, let's go to our, let me see if I can share my screen. All right. Let me know if you can see that.
Yes.
All right. So here we have your GetRo rating. So our last observation, these were some of the things that I noticed and that we worked on and we gave feedback to. So this is based off your second observation, and it will be used as a model for what you can take away from this, and so that the next time I come to observe, or anybody comes to observe you, you know what specific steps to take. So on the GET rubric, I decided to stick with our 1B, which is motivate students, build student accountability, celebrate successes, and connect goals to college. So during my second observation, and a lot of these actually carried on from the first observation, you just needed a few tweaks and you were able to implement that. And what I really enjoyed was that I could tell that whatever advice, whatever goals that I gave you the first time around, I could tell that you were really quick to implement them, because I didn't give you a lot of time. It was one day afterwards that I came for the second observation, and I could tell that you from the get-go were made the change. So for your motivate students, oh, give me 1 second. Okay. Okay, sorry about that. So from the get-go, I rated you on advanced for motivating the students. I believe that you adopted a whatever it takes attitude and various strategies to motivate 90% of your students to reach their goals. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this. So when it came to motivating your students, I'm a very strong believer that motivating students takes time. It takes a lot of work to get to that point. And from what I saw from your students, and I was very impressed, I will not stop saying how impressed I am of you. From what I saw, the students is that they are continuously motivated, so that when you walk to the point where when you walked into that classroom, I knew that this is something that they were doing every day. I know that you were motivating them every day. Because of how many hands went up when you asked them questions, of how many people were engaged in what they were doing. You can't really get that one time around. It takes a lot of weeks of planning and special care for your students for you to get to that point. And that's a lot of things that not a lot of teachers, can do in their first year in a STAR grade. It's your first year in a STAR level. So you should be very proud about that you are able to come into a new grade level, come into a very high stressful kind of environment, and still have a classroom that a student can feel very safe, can still feel very motivated to want to work for you, to want to learn. So that you scored very advanced on that. The only reason why you weren't exceptional, and it was just a few things where I only saw 90% of the students there, and I realized that's hard, but we're going to try to get that 100% next time, because you do have our students who, whatever their history is, whatever their reason is, that they weren't fully involved in the lesson, and I understand that. I'm a teacher as well, so I understand that there are some students who you just require a little bit more work. So that's your little push for that specific get rubric part, which is motivate up to 100% of your students. So, and it does take a lot of work. It takes a lot of individual one-on-one, and that's what we're talking about, delivering that one-on-one intervention so that you can get those 100% of the students to be involved. For your build student accountability, all students can answer questions such as, are you on track to meet your goals? What specific things do you need to do to meet your goals? So I was walking around, I was noticing their trackers were all up to date. They knew what they got on the last test. They knew what their goals were for the next test. Everyone had it written in their trackers, and you had them everywhere in the classroom. So that was excellent, because you do need to build student accountability. The more they understand what they're working towards, the more effort they put into it. So I really appreciated that. You also scored exceptional on celebrate successes. A teacher uses specific strategies to celebrate student success on an ongoing basis, recognition given for high performance growth. So the celebration, again, it's something that you can see from the moment that you're there. I saw that your thermometer charts were up. You were making celebrations for turning in their homework. It was very nice to see. You can also tell that they wanted to perform for you, and that comes from a strong connection with the kids. That comes from celebrating their successes, even if it's a little. And you did a really good job during the lesson. Good job or great job, or even when somebody was getting something wrong, you didn't move on to the next student. You kind of guided him with the guiding questions to make sure that it wasn't so challenging for them. So I specifically noted that when it came to every single person, you really tried to get them to answer, and they wanted to, I can't say it enough, they wanted to work for you. Then you established a really good connection with those students. And of course, connecting our goals to college, our goal is always for them to go to college, as you know. So I believe everything here tied together gave you a really exceptional rating to connect schools into college. Did you have any questions about how you scored?
No, everything is pretty clear. I know just 100% of students, but like you said, I mean, it's just those students that, getting them a little bit more motivated or a little bit more excited to participate is where I'm needing to work on. So that's definitely something that I'm going to be checking out a little bit more.
Yeah, definitely. It's something that it's more difficult. It's difficult for every student, every teacher, regardless of how many years they have of experience in the grade level. Getting 100% is always difficult. But like I said, do you think intervention or tutoring would help with those, aside from like motivation inside of the classroom?
I'm more than likely I would assume so. It's just getting them confidence, building their confidence, right? And it's starting small with smaller questions, getting like, okay, I got this one right, maybe I can get the next one right. And just things like that tutoring might be able to, even in school, when we take them out during our elective periods, that around that time we can start building their confidence again.
Have you started any tutoring with your third grade students?
Yeah, we do after school tutoring on Wednesdays and Thursdays. Tuesdays and then we also do Thursdays and Fridays during our elective periods. Pushing those students from approaches to masters meets.
Yes. I was looking at their data. You have a lot of students who are already on their approaches marks. You had a lot of students who are on their approach marks and very close to it. They're on the high did not meet and very close. Do you feel like the after school tutoring has made any changes or to their progress so far?
I do. I've seen a lot of growth. There's just two TEKs that we're consistently scoring a little bit lower than average on, but I've seen both of those grades, double with the tutoring, especially in those students that we're trying to push further into our meets or masters.
That's good. I'm glad. So then some intervention, school intervention might be beneficial for them too. So I'm going to stop sharing here and give me a sec. All right. So before we end, did you have any questions that we can talk about before your next observation is scheduled? You don't have another observation scheduled for another week, a week and a half. So I just wanted to make sure that we answered any questions that you had aside from your ratings. Was there anything in particular that was on your mind?
I guess one thing that I don't want to say that I'm struggling with, but I am struggling with, is just keeping, um, I want to say keeping what is being taught through Eureka aligned to TEKS. I think the TEKS is very, I mean, Eureka teaches very different from what is tested on the STAR. And I think that's what throws me off is like where do I implement what's on the STAR to what's in Eureka? You know what I mean? And I guess that's where the kids don't have practice until they see it on their topic quizzes, and that's what causes me a little bit of like, I guess, with STAR related questions. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I could definitely relate to that because our Eureka program, it's a very great tool to ensure that our students are understanding what they're learning, but it is very far as to what they're going to be tested on. So I will tell you this, this year, the whole STAR has been revamped. It's really new. So as much as you want to prepare for a test, you know, in reality, it's going to be new to everybody. And from my training and my assumption of how they're going to get tested, the better they know the material and what it's asking of them, and the more that they work on those critical thinking skills, the better. Because you're going to prepare them for any kind of question, any kind of answer style that they're going to throw at them. Now, that being said, that doesn't mean you shouldn't be prepared. And I think that's where your nerves comes from, right? Because you're prepared for a STAR test. You've never had one. You've never taught it before. So I will say that making sure that your exit tickets are on the computer, looking into the past STAR tests, looking for at their past STAR tests can be a very, very good indicator as to how everything that you're teaching them is aligned. So definitely going back to the old STAR tests.
I can't hear you.
Sorry about that. So definitely going back into those the STAR questions and seeing how they're getting tested, and it's aligned to the material that you're aligned. So this last observation is a good segue into your frame of mind for your next lessons. Looking at how that TEK specifically is going to be tested and was tested in the past. The best you can do is make sure that they understand the question and how the question is being framed, because to my understanding, it's going to be very similar. The framing of the question is going to be very similar, which is going a different route as to the delivery method, which is on the computer. So tying back your TEKS to how it's getting tested on the STAR test using past STAR tests. 2, getting them used to using the computer for your exit tickets, your exams, which you're already doing, but making sure there's a consistency in that is going to work as well. And 3, their notes taking, making sure that they know how to take notes on the side already. They're doing it for their exit tickets, that they do it for their tests and their reviews and stuff, so that when it comes to the test, they already know how to organize their work. Because in 3rd and 4th grade, you know, that's what we're noticing, that their handwriting, the organization, how they solve their questions with the computer, it's very different than last year. Last year, they could highlight, they could circle, they can do all that. They could do all of that, and they're so used to taking paper tests. Of course, the 3rd grade students, this is brand new all for them. So, which could be a good thing and bad thing. You know, they're not used to taking the STAR test on paper like the way the 4th and 5th graders are. But that you can do. Just always, always, always going back to the STAR test. And that could be our next action step for our lesson plan. So what I used to do is prior to this year, I used to get a STAR question, find out how it's aligned specifically to what I am teaching, and kind of use that as a like a push exit ticket. So not necessarily your exit ticket, but you always have students who are finishing, and this could actually work hand in hand with the intervention space later on that you can squeeze into. So once you do your lesson, once you're done with all of that, you notice that you have, hey, 5-10 minutes extra towards the end of the class. I go do individual one-on-one with students that need your help. Release the other release the other students to do those little push exit tickets that is directly, I'm talking like exactly how they're going to be taught in the STAR test. They're already getting exposed to how how they're going to get tested on. They're already going to get exposed to doing things on their own, on their notes with their computer. Use your computer as it's there for you. EdSite is there. Make the exit tickets already, so you just have to release them on the computer. You don't even have to work on delivering the question to them or switching it on the PowerPoint. So that could really, really help you. But
I do have a question regarding like the note, right? So the notes or their note taking. So I guess one of the things that is taught, well, like the main thing that is taught in third grade is the multiplication, right? The multiplication and division is like that's the only thing that they're looking at. So what happens is that they get thrown a very easy problem. 42 apples and three apples. What's the total? They want to multiply. And that's because they're not, I mean, I want to say like they're not looking at the keywords, you know, they're not looking at, I guess they're just wanting to immediately get a problem, do the steps that we've done for multiplication and division, putting those numbers, like they're not reading the problem. So how would you, I guess, attack it when they're just kind of getting the numbers and then putting them into their notes and then just solving for multiplication when that's not the case?
Is this like in that scenario, is that question a division problem?
So no, it would be something easy, right? Like an addition problem. They want to know the total of 4 apples and 5 apples, and you know, and is the key word, but they're like, okay, 4 and 5, and then they put them in their little notes. Because I mean, when I'm teaching multiplication, they do the get on the side, the groups, the number in each, and their total. So they're not looking at the story or what the story is asking of them. They're only seeing the numbers and then wanting to just plug those numbers into the get and not actually like read carefully. And I guess they're making really, really simple mistakes on those kinds of problems. And I don't know how to, I guess.
Yeah, I understand. Then in that case, it's definitely about your lesson delivery and your expectations. So let me show you something from a 4th grade lesson plan. All right, so let me show you something right here. So this is a 4th grade review, and I feel like it's kind of the same scenario as you. So this is how the 4th grade teacher, has her annotations. These are her expectations for every single problem. And if you notice, the form of how she is doing it stays the same for every. So she made a notes-taking process that will never change, regardless if it's multiplication or division, What does change is the keywords on top. So you see on top, Miss Salinas and her family with 6 Flags. There were 5 members. Each ticket for the park was $46. How much money? So she's having the students write keywords that are going to be helpful for when they're problem solving. So for this one, there are 5 members. Each ticket was $46. How much money? And notice how she's not asking them to write each equals multiply. Okay, do you see what it says there? It says find total equals multiply. So she is having them think for every single problem, okay, you're taking your notes. When you take your notes, ask yourself, are they giving you a total or are you trying to find a total? And these students, they already know that if you're trying to find a total, you're either multiplying or adding. Those are the two things you can do when you're trying to find a total. Now, if they're reading the question, they're understanding in their head, and they put, well, they're giving you a total, they know that it's either dividing or subtracting. But she's giving them that thought process. She's training them on that thought process. She's not necessarily training them on whenever you see the word each, because that's not necessarily true. Because if I have a question that says they each had the same number of so and so, then it's division. She's teaching them to always put whether they're looking for a total or they're giving a total, and that leads to this whole other. That's the same thing. They do a strip diagram and then they write their question down and so on and so forth. So finding a way, and I don't know if I can find a division problem, but even the division problems or adding problems or subtraction problems, they all use the same note-taking skills. And it's made to make sure that they understand what they are doing, not necessarily looking for keywords. So let's say, let me see if I can do.
And I know that, I mean, for the most part, the addendum usually says that, right? Like the little teach thingies in the Eureka book will say, like, don't have the students looking at keywords. And that, you know what I mean, you know, the teach to in the little green boxes. And so they don't really, they're not utilizing those keywords like each, meaning each. What I'm saying is like, they can go through all this process, right? Finding the total, finding each rate, exactly the same thing that you're doing. The only problem is that they're getting the technique wrong, right? Like not so much a technique, but like the, how do you say the, how, I don't want to say strategy, but they're just confusing it, like where it is, and that's the problem.
Then
and I don't.
That's where something like this also goes hand in hand, because when you're doing it with the kids, if they mess up on this top part, what does that tell you?
Then they're not clear on the story.
That it's a reading comprehension issue, that they're not clear on what they're supposed to be doing because they're not understanding it. So because you have all the students doing the exact same thing and you see that a lot of students are getting this part wrong. So this, for example, is a division problem. You see how it changed, but not really? It says instead of Christy bought 13 roses and she put 6 roses into each vase, how much vases will she use? That word each is there again. But are you supposed to multiply? No. Why? Because they're giving you a total amount of roses and she's having them do this part on the top. So if she's walking around and she notices that only 10 of the 20 kids put giving total and some of them put find total, she's stopping right there and then she's like, this is the problem. This is it. But if they do everything right, they know they're supposed to divide. And right here, when they're doing their little groupings, it's a computational error down here. What do you think the problem is?
They're putting it the keywords wrong, like they're
so
switching the information.
They got the keywords correct. They did the strip diagram correct. They know they're supposed to divide. But down here, instead of getting 2 remainder 1, they get 5. Then you know that it's a division error. So then that's when I'm going to go back and stop and reteach. I'm not going to waste my time with the top part. I'm not going to waste my time as a teacher asking those guiding questions to see if they know whether or not they should divide, because that's not the issue. It's down here. But if I didn't have all of my students doing the same thing, I'm not going to get that data. I'm not going to get that immediate data that tells me this is the problem, which is why having a note-taking process like this from the get-go and really sticking to it for every single problem is going to help you out.
Yeah.
And it could be with any problem.
And I mean, for
And
the most part, that's what we do. I mean, I do like, for example, they get and like the groups, they each in the total. Even if they start with the total, then on the side they do like it's like a multiply, multiply, divide. And so
mhm.
if they give us the two numbers to multiply, they know it's multiplying. But I get it. I get what you're saying. Not the story in itself, but the technique, the strategy to do the actual work is where they're
Mhm.
making a mistake.
So do you
Yeah.
do you have a lot of people? Do you have a lot of students? What part do you think that your students mostly get confused about?
I think it's the wording. I think that they see multiplication and division problems so often that when they get addition problems or subtraction problems, they're like, oh, but we don't do that anymore because we haven't done it in so long.
Oh, I
That's what's
see.
throwing
I
them off.
see. They're expecting it. Like, hey,
Yeah,
today, this week, we've been doing all multiplication, so I know regardless of what question they give us, it's going to be multiplication.
yeah,
Well, if that's the case, then I would say switch up their do nows because your do nows are your flexible points. You know, your do nows are supposed to be from previous teaks, but you're getting to a point in the year where now your do nows could be after our benchmark. Our do nows are going to be, and I guess because you haven't been exposed to that yet because you're a new teacher. After our benchmarks, that's typically when we target all past failing teaks in our do nows, and you
Mhm.
can target like 2 or 3 different teaks throughout the week to really get those gears moving and trying to figure out like, oh, what do I really do for this question? So that's going to start a little bit later because right now our do nows have to be with what the lesson we taught yesterday was.
Yeah,
It's going to change very soon. After December, our benchmarks, that's typically where we start using our do nows as low teaks. If they scored low in 1 teak or 2 teaks, this is where we target them. But you haven't
yeah,
been exposed to that. So I can see where, yeah, I can see where that would work for you.
the
So
confusion
that
comes.
is
Yeah,
going
for
to
sure.
be coming up later on. Okay.
Okay,
All right.
very good.
Did you have any other questions? Anything else that we can talk about for your observations or your ratings or anything?
I think everything was pretty clear. I think we're all good.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your time. Thank you for allowing me to observe you, to rate you, and to talk to you. So I really appreciate that, Miss Garza.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Let me go ahead and stop the recording and have yourself a great day.